Some things never change. Like opening beer bottles. Ah, stubborn. Like opening beer bottles with a tripod. Cheers. While others obviously do. My name is Radu, welcome to a new video, welcome to 1,000 words, and welcome to our new home. By the grace of God and some very fortunate circumstances, I was able to very quickly and easily sell my tiny studio apartment I had lived in for the last 5 years, and subsequently buy this pretty spacious 2-room apartment. I'm really almost at a loss for words about how much I'm happy with this. I really can't tell you how big of an upgrade this is, but to cut to the chase and talk about what really matters and why you're here is another lens comparison. Because I had so much fun making it, and you apparently had quite a bit of fun watching it, today we're taking a look at the SMC Pentax M 50mm f1.4, the latter non-radioactive version, the Konica Hexanon AR 50mm f1.4, yet again the latter, this time radioactive version, and the star of the show. Yeah, I know, I've spoiled it already, but stick around to see exactly how. This is the star of the show, the Olympus OM-System 50mm f1.4. This is the tiniest of the bunch and already my favorite lens ever. It has dethroned the Konica 40mm f1.8, which has been my favorite lens ever, and it has also dethroned my favorite 50 ever, the Carl Zeiss Jena 50 2.8, the pre-war design, the aluminium construction. This has become my favorite 50 and my favorite lens. It's fantastic. Stick around, subscribe to be able to be notified when I upload the review for this one. Also for the Pentax, reviews in works. And if we're on the subject, kindly consider liking this video. Tell the algorithm it's a good video and it should be pushing it into other people's recommended lists. Before going to the computer and taking a look at actual photos and doing some actual pixel peeping, I wanna ask for your support. If you feel so inclined, consider donating $1 or $2. There's a Buy Me a Coffee and a PayPal link down below in the description. Likes are always the best thing you can do to support this endeavor of mine. Subscribe and share it with your friends. I do want to tease a very, very important project of mine that is in the works, and that is the publishing of my first photo book. I will be publishing, instead of 1,000 words, there's a video on the channel. I think it's this corner, if not, it's that corner. You can watch my pre-production copy, the one I printed just for myself, and that's a good idea of what's to come. But the completed published book will have some photos missing while others added, and there will be precisely 33 copies available for sale. Still 28 available, 5 have already been sold. Thank you to those that bought it. Thank you for being here, and let's talk photos. Let's switch over to the computer and let's do some pixel peeping. With the exception of these three, about which I'll talk about a little later, all images were taken as JPEGs using Sony's built-in standard color picture profile. No other post-processing has been done, so in order to maintain a level playing field, I have renamed all the files for your convenience so you can always know what image I'm talking about. Let's get rid of this panel and perhaps this panel. First up is the Olympus, shot at wide open, around 5 meters. That's 15 feet for you weirdos out there using limbs and anatomical parts to measure distances, and it's quite pleasant. Not that sharp, but then again we're talking about an f1.4 opening. Zooming in at 100%, there is a decent amount of sharpness, some obvious chromatic aberrations in high contrast areas. Very easily fixable in post, but it is there. The sharpness that is present is quite satisfactory, at least for a lens shot wide open. Moving on into the corners, we already start to see quite a bit of smearing. Very, very strong softness. Strong softness, yeah, I guess that's the thing. Bit less so on the sides. The corners seem to be the most egregious, but it's nothing terrible. I mean, yeah, it is soft, but it's a wide open lens, and corners are dark, and you can see the obvious vignette here. Corners are dark and soft. Colors are a bit on the cooler side, and while I do prefer warmer colors, this is quite pleasant, quite a bit of contrast, nice vivid colors. Moving on to the Pentax. It is appearing to be slightly wider. I'm not entirely sure how that's possible because I've shot all these photos on a tripod with image stabilization off, so there should be no differences in framing. However, the Pentax is, let's open this up for the sake of the waveform here. The Pentax is yet again slightly brighter and slightly wider. Let's check sharpness at 100% in the middle. It's comparable to the Olympus. However, slightly, ever so slightly less sharp. Maybe more than slightly, quite noticeably less sharp. And I think there is a bit more chromatic aberration as well. Moving on into the corners, there is kind of like the same level of smearing and softness, although corners appear to be less dark. Softness and smearing, very, very strong smudging and chromatic aberrations. Edges and especially so corners are really, really kind of bad with the Pentax. but we've established that already in our last comparison. Moving on to the Konica, if it will load, it's noticeably yellower, probably because of the rare earths used in the construction of the optical elements, giving it radioactive properties. A bit of chromatic aberration here, less so than the Pentax M, possibly less so even than the Olympus. However, I think this might be... No, it's not the softest. The Pentax is again the softness of the bunch. The Konica, shot at wide open, has quite a bit less softness. Does it though? It would seem it's less smeared and smudgy than the Pentax, but the Olympus already seems to be performing the best as far as sharpness goes in the extreme edges and corners. Judging the picture overall, I like the colors best on the Konica. They're warmer, more pleasant and softer, followed closely by the Pentax. As far as color rendition goes, I prefer it to the very cold rendition of the Olympus. Moving on to the next set of 3 images. These are the same scene shot at f8. Let's zoom in at 100% and check sharpness. Oh my sweet Jesus. Sharpness is pretty much bang on. It's perfect. The level of detail is astounding. Even at 200%, there's just an amazing amount of detail. Perfect rendition. Corners are perfect. They're sharp. There's no trace of vignetting. There's nothing in the way of chromatic aberrations. Images taken with the Olympus at f8 are pretty much perfect. The amount of detail is fantastic. Really, really great detail all around, all throughout the image. It's perfectly sharp, very, very, very pleasant. The Pentax is sharp, and it would appear to be a little... No, I don't think so. I thought it was sharper still than the Olympus, but it doesn't appear to be. No, definitely not sharper, but decently sharp. Now, there's some softness in just the very most extreme corner here, but seeing how the gold standard, some sharpness here as well, seeing how the standard is already the Olympus, kind of like sets a bit of a high bar for the other two. And let's check the Konica, much darker. Is it now like almost like a third of a stop? A third of a stop darker. And let's check out sharpness. About on par with the Pentax and slightly less sharp than the Olympus. There's the tiniest bit of haloing here. Just check how sharp these edges are. Really perfect edge rendition here. While the Pentax has quite a bit of haloing and blooming in high contrast areas, and so does the Konica, just a tiny bit. Corners are a bit better than the Pentax, but nothing quite like the Olympus. Colors seem to be yet again warmer. And possibly a bit more contrasty than the Pentax, and about as contrasty as the Olympus. Now, seeing how we've finished with the sets of images shot at 5 meters, we already can draw some conclusions. The Olympus seems to be the best as far as sharpness goes. The Konica seems to be just, at least as far as my preferences go, the Konica seems to be the prettiest as far as colors go, while the Pentax is just tagging along as a good enough. Now, this is where something really interesting happens. It's wide open, shot at infinity. Let's zoom in to 100% and check sharpness at infinity. This is about, what is it, like 200 meters, something like that. So it's infinity, all right. And the Olympus is surprisingly sharp, really, really amazingly sharp. Seeing how this is shot at infinity and wide open. Yeah, there is some chromatic aberrations. There's this purple fringing in high contrast area. Nothing that can be easily fixed in post, but it is there, and it's something that pretty much all lenses do, even the modern contemporary ones. Where things start to get really, really interesting is when we move over to the next images. This is the Olympus. Switching over to the Pentax, and oh my Jesus, what is this mess? Switching over to the Konica is, it's slightly better, but really soft. So what is this? When I first saw these images, I thought I perhaps made a mistake, and maybe I didn't shoot the Olympus wide open, because just the sharpness difference is just outstanding. It's not even a little, it's not even considerable, it's a lot. It's better and sharper by leaps and bounds. So I thought that maybe I made a mistake. Maybe these two, the Pentax and the Konica here, were shot wide open, and this was perhaps shot at maybe f2, f2.8, and I suspected user error. So I took another batch of 3 images. Now, being the numbnut that I am, I failed to shoot these as JPEGs. I shot them as RAWs, and I only applied the, what is it, where is it? This one. The bundle profile, the auto matched curve, which does something like this. Pretty much what's done in camera. So it's safe to say that they're on the same level playing field as the others. But I thought it was worth mentioning, for the sake of transparency, that these were originally shot as RAWs. I applied that curve, exported them as JPEGs, and done nothing else. Let's check infinity focus here. It's yet again amazingly sharp. Yes, there is fringing, quite a bit of fringing, but nothing egregious, and certainly nothing that's not very easily, trivially even, fixable in post. Moving on to the Pentax, And it's comparable, but softer. The Konica is yet again softer still. So what? Did I make a mistake with these three here? Most probably yes. Switching over to the Olympus again, it's very, very sharp wide open. Quite surprisingly so. I don't think I've seen, just, you're able to tell apart this person's face. His features are noticeable. There's a nose, there's eyes, there's a mouth, there's buttons, there's a zip on his jacket, there's pockets here. You can even read the license plate here. Hey, it just goes to show, you can easily read the text here. It just goes to show that this lens, the Olympus 50mm f1.4, is just apparently in a league of its own. Really, really splendidly sharp. Now, the Pentax is not much worse in this set. The purple fringing and the haloing is really quite worse. However, the sharpness is not much worse. Now, did I make the opposite mistake here? Very, very improbable, because I was very careful with my settings. As you move towards the edges, it gets softer, but right in the middle here, it's decently soft still. The Konica has that very elegant, soft sharpness. I like this a lot. It's really tame. It is sharp, but it's not Olympus level sharp. However, it's perfectly usable, and it has got a certain elegance to the way it renders colors and tones, and it's surprisingly well controlled as far as fringing goes and chromatic aberrations. The Konica coatings and optics are really spectacular. The Olympus seems to be actually not quite cold, but rather neutral as far as rendering goes. The Pentax seems to be the cold one here, veering toward purple even. And this is really kind of warm. Let's move on to the next set of three. This is f8 at infinity. This is stupidly sharp. It almost appears to be too sharp. Almost like it has been sharpened in post, but I assure you it hasn't been. It's really, really sharp. Corners are very, very sharp. There's no trace of vignetting, no trace of chromatic aberrations, no purple fringing, just copious amounts of sharpness. And overall, the image has quite a neutral rendering. Moving on to the Pentax, it's significantly brighter yet again. Remember this from the last video? The Pentax seems to have the best light transmission coefficient, so it makes the brightest images. 100% at infinity, it's decently sharp, but nothing compared to the bitingly sharp, razor perfect sharpness of the Olympus. The Pentax is quite decent, very usable. Corners are decent. There's perhaps There is some fringing in the most extreme corners of the image, but other than that, the image is quite correct. Moving on to the Konica, it's quite good, quite very good. Very near the performance of the Olympus. Yet again, warmer, but we've already become accustomed to that. Very good sharpness. Excellent level of detail. Even right here in front where it's not really supposed to be in focus, but as soon as you move 10-15 meters from your position, all the way to infinity is tack sharp. Tack sharp. Nice sun stars here. Really just great performance. Excellent level of detail. Pretty good. Moving on, checking out the quality of the depth of field blur. This is shot at wide open and pretty much minimum focusing distance, about 0.5 meter. The Olympus seems to be the coldest again. The Pentax is a bit reddish, while the Konica is definitely yellow. But as far as the bokeh goes, rather the blur in the background, the Pentax seems to be the softest, followed by the Konica and then the Olympus. Focus was achieved right here on this edge. Not much else to say here. They're very similar in terms of the depth of field blur. Now let's check bokeh and the transition from in focus to completely out of focus. This is the Olympus. Very pleasant blur here. Quite beautiful. The Pentax is the smoothest yet again. Very smooth. Just wonderful. And the Konica seems to be the most characterful. Or there's a bit of nervousness here. It appears to me that the Olympus can get slightly jittery. But I do enjoy this. It's pleasant still. The Pentax is really smooth. Just wonderful balls of bokeh, really smooth. And the Konica is a bit more characterful, but not as jittery and defined as the Olympus. Colors are best with the Konica. Really amazing colors. Really fantastic, characterful bokeh. Not jittery, but really strong personality. The Pentax is really soft, and it's quite apparent here. The Olympus can get a bit nervous. This is really soft, and yet softer still on the Pentax. Let's move over to the last set of images, where we shoot directly into the sun, looking for tough shooting condition performance, the quality of the flares, how much they suffer from veiling and ghosting and loss of contrast. First up, Olympus. Quite a strong flare here. Not the most attractive flare, but not really something that ruins your image. there is quite a bit of chromatic aberrations, purple fringing, a mess of colors here. This is really tough shooting conditions. So this right here is the sun. So it's not something you would do every day. And if and when you do this kind of scenario, it's something to be expected. The way it performs is quite erratic, but it's not unpleasant. I like this performance. I like the strong vivid red in the flare here. There's a decent amount of contrast, but moving on to the Pentax, it's got this part of the flare here I find quite attractive, more so than these two purple reddish spots here. However, I'm really not enjoying this part here. This smudginess, this smearing of color is not great. Just goes to show that optically speaking, the Pentax is the weakest of the two. And these balls here are just not as pretty. This looks really interesting. And this looks just like, well, it's very defined. These balls seem to be very hard-edged. Contrast loss is considerable, but it's nothing egregious, it's nothing terrible. I'm really disliking this part here. This rainbow of sludge, it almost looks like an oil spill. And lastly, the Konica Hexanon has quite a bit of rainbowish oil spill effect here. A nice little flare ball here. And generally, I think it's the most pleasant of them all. Yet again, surprises me how well it handles this really difficult. Check out, this is the Olympus. Chromatic aberrations galore. This is the Pentax. This is, if you zoom in, it's really terrible. However, if you zoom in with the Konica, there's just a bit of it. It's nothing egregious. The coatings of the Konica are really on a level of their own. It's just fantastic the way they handle these tough shooting conditions. Bokeh balls here are pretty. That's about it for. What do you think? Write down your thoughts in the comments. They changed the label for this. And yeah, how could I have forgotten the channel regular? 50 cent a bottle Neumarkt. Changed label, same glorious, bitter, manly taste. Cheers, guys. Thank you for sticking around. I hope you found this video entertaining, informative, and valuable. I hope the rather modest attempt at upgrading the lighting and framing of this thing I'm doing here is to your liking. It's certainly a work in progress, and certainly there is still more to be done, but hey, a light here, light there. There's also a rim light behind me, which I'm not entirely sure if it's coming across, but I promise it's there. That said, thank you for watching. Like, subscribe, comment down below. I'm really always curious to see what you think of this. Tell me your thoughts about your favorite 50. Tell me what you think about my findings here, and until next time, I bid you farewell. This has been Radu, and this has been 1,000 Words. Bye bye.